And welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. Apologies, we're a couple of minutes late. We were talking all things Spanish football for some reason or other. I don't know why, but I'm joined, as always, on this Friday by Tony Haggerty. How you doing, Tony?
Very well, Larry, yourself?
Fine. And joining us for his appearance this month is Alan Morrison. How you doing, Alan?
I'm all right. Thank you, Laura. Cheers.
Yes, Alan appears on the Huddle Breakdown podcast, which you can also find everywhere that you can find good podcasts. If you're here, I'm sure you know how to work all the search engines and all that to find it, so keep an eye out for it. It's an interesting listen always. Quite a bit to discuss today with the 3-2 victory over Aberdeen, the Scottish Cup fifth round game against Raith Rovers coming up at the weekend, and anything else that comes to mind in between. Just want to say a couple of hellos. Hello to Alan Robertson watching on YouTube, and hello to William McFadden watching on YouTube as well. If you want to get involved in the show, get in the comments and we will try and read out anything you've got. If you've got any questions for the panellists or any points you want to raise, then we'll be happy to discuss it. So, Tony, I'll come to you first. We had a brief discussion before we came on air about the nature of the game. To paraphrase a famous former Scottish football manager, I said it was a bit of a game full of squeaky bum time. It was not an enjoyable one for me. You made the point that maybe the first 45 minutes were a little bit more enjoyable. What was your overall view of the game on the other night?
My overall view is that Celtic won 3-2. Another difficult venues out the road. And to quote King Jim, you move on. Mm-hmm. Yep, it was a lot hairier than it probably needed to be. Defensive frailties, sure Alan will be able to go into that in a wee bit more depth. Came to the fore again, but again in a position of adversity, they got their noses in front very quickly after conceding the equaliser. And same as the cup final, they went behind, and I think it was less than a minute, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. They were level in less than a minute again, Aberdeen. So Ange keeps referring to it with all sorts of challenges thrown at them this season, and they just keep rising to them and meeting them head on. And I don't know about you, but you can go into all sorts of the minutiae and the detail of the performance, but they won. And it's 12 left. And if they keep winning, they'll win the title. Even if biting the hand off to be at this stage last July or June when Ange took over. So you've got to embrace it. It's going to be like this. It's going to be a roller coaster. It's going to be squeaky bum time for the next 12 games. But yep, let's meet it head on. The two performances before that were terrific. That was a wee kind of reminder that it's certain situations that you can't switch off, especially in defence. And but 3 points is all that matters in these games, and they got that. So I was delighted with the resilience and the character that they showed, as the manager alluded to as well after it. So, yeah, it's 12 to go. It's going to be torture. It's going to be absolute torture with a dozen to go. But tell you what, we'll embrace it. We'll see where it takes us. I think we're far ahead of schedule than anyone ever thought we would be at this stage in the season, and we're still competing for 4 trophies. Unbelievable achievement that in itself.
Lorcar on YouTube says, well said, Tony. We won 3 points, move on, elbow cough. Quite right in these times to make it an elbow cough as well. Alan, I'll come to you as well on this one. Tony raised a couple of good points there. I think it's easy to forget, for some more than others, the amount that we covered last season, it's not so easy to forget, but the position we were in last season compared to the position we're in this season, it's sometimes you can get caught up in the week to week and the performances and the level of performances, but overall where we are in the league is a position, as Tony said, we would have bit someone's hand off for last July. What did you make of that performance on Wednesday night overall? Is it, as Tony says, is it the victory that's the most important thing, or was there bits of it that maybe concerned you a little bit going forward into the next few weeks?
Well, yeah, I've been told to move on, so I've really got nothing more to say, to be honest. No, as Tony, I do love to dig about in the minutiae of the performance because,
No,
and I know the reason for that. No, the reason for that, the serious point about that is what does it teach you about how the team is going to perform going forward? That's what I'm thinking about. Is what does it tell us about how it's going to go in the next sort of few months, sort of thing. So, in that regard, I completely agree with what Tony said about being way ahead of schedule in terms of thinking about where we were. I mean, when we come to the Raith Rovers game, I was looking at where we were at that point in time, which was kind of mid-September. We were in a very different place at that point, and I think we could probably just maybe reflect on that when we cover the build up to that game. But in terms of the game on the midweek there, yeah, I mean, it is a bit of relief, but I think it's unrealistic to expect Celtic to cruise through every game 4-0 like we did against Motherwell. Although it could have been the same because it looked to me as if Stephen Glass hadn't watched Celtic play the Derby, hadn't watched Celtic play Motherwell, and set his team up with exactly the same flaws as Van Bronckhorst and Alexander did, whereby essentially he let Celtic fullbacks do whatever they wanted to do with the ball, and he left his wide wing backs exposed to overloads in wide areas, and we just made absolute hay when we didn't even need to try that hard to score goals. A little bit of a shimmy and a magic from O'Reilly, a great run from Jota, and then we get that little bit of luck, and people will know. They watch the Huddle Breakdown. We talk about variance all the time, and how for a good part of 18 months Celtic have not had a lot of positive variance, let's call it, and so now in the last few games, guess what? A few shots from outside the box were going in, and that's that little bit of luck changing. Hatate's shot weaving through about 8 defenders into the far corner. O'Reilly's shot hitting Bates perfectly to go right into the corner. These are little bits of luck that perhaps haven't been there. But it's funny how when the confidence is high and the team believes in itself, the luckier you get as well. So there's a bit of that to it also. So I think it's all good. I'm not feeling guilty about the positive variance. I'm embracing it because I think we were absolutely due it, and long may it continue. And obviously, another thing I was pleased about was before we come to the sort of what were the concerns, was the fact that once again, having got a goal back in front in around about what was it, the middle of the 60th, between the 60th and 70th minutes, there was actually very little jeopardy after that. And I think what I'm learning about this team is there's no doubt that the way that Ange wants Celtic to play is a very difficult and demanding style for the players, not only around the decisions they have to make in terms of their positioning on the pitch, because he's looking for players to create these overload situations, and that requires players to think about where they are on the pitch, and do I invert, do I go pull wide, do I come inside, is it an overlapping run or an underlapping run? These are all difficult decisions, right, that people have got to make on the hoof, and it's physically demanding because he wants them to press high, and we know that the team has had huge issues with injury, and players are all different levels of coming back from injury. The Japanese boys that were signed in December, January, effectively just coming towards the end of their pre-season. So everyone's at different stages of their injury. So everyone's got different profiles of where they are on the sort of fitness spectrum. So juggling all those things is difficult. And we can see that the team is lagging in midway through the second halves. And I put out a tweet which showed that Celtic are conceding about 37% of their goals between the 50th, 60th, and the 50th and the 70th minute. That midpoint of the second half, right? Now, normally the normal distribution of goals in that period is about 20%. So we're way above that. If you look at Celtic historically over the last 7 years that I've got data for, it's about 20%. It's pretty constant. So massive uptick in goals conceded in that middle of that second half period, and it's got to be down to fitness. My response to that is, well, how do you mitigate that? And you make substitutions earlier, because what happens when substitutions finally do arrive is that we tend to close the game out. And this absolutely remarkable stat that we've only conceded 1 goal in domestic football in the last 20 minutes of matches, and that was on the first game of the season against Hearts, is remarkable for a team that plays the way Celtic does. So get the subs done earlier, and let's all have a bit less stress. I keep mentioning, Chris Davis, especially Rodgers, they were excellent at sensing problems before they became issues. They saw risk and they dealt with it, and they made changes early before they manifest into major issues. Postecoglou tends to react after the fact and then solve the problem. So I think that's just a bit of an adjustment that we could make. But the other really pleasing aspect that I took from that game was the fact that not only is this a very demanding style of play for Celtic to implement and execute, it's incredibly difficult to play against. And what we're seeing is that opposition teams are out on their feet. Hence that stat about not conceding any goals in the last 20 minutes of games. Once Aberdeen's bubble was burst, they had nothing left. Now, again, Glass made 2 substitutions at half-time, and fair play to him, he corrected his ridiculous setup, and he put together a far more coherent team for the second half. But he didn't make another sub after that, and I would have thought he should have been chucking on players in the last 20 minutes to get an equaliser. Thank goodness he didn't. His team, had basically shot their bolt, and Celtic saw the game out, and we've seen that, even in the derby, right? We let them have a lot of the ball. They came forward a lot, created virtually nothing. It all just petered out. Lovely. That's what I want to see towards the end of the season. All I ask of Ange is just make those substitutions a little bit earlier, and let's stop us all having as much stress as we saw.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Rodgers did make a lot of good decisions, good substitutions as Celtic manager. I don't think it's working out quite as well for him at Leicester at the moment, but I take no satisfaction in it, as you both know. Tony, I'll come back to you on some of those points that Alan made about the game and the way that it panned out. I mean, you mentioned it before we went live on air, and Alan talks about how we sort of killed off the game with that third goal, and Aberdeen had nothing more to give after that, which is understandable. They'd fought back twice to get into the equalising position, but it's something that we have seen even in the more comfortable victories against Hearts, against Rangers, against Motherwell, that we have this absolutely bombastic first half. We go out and we blow teams away. We look absolutely unplayable. We always come in at half-time saying we're only 2 or 3 goals up. We could be 5 or 6 up. And invariably we come out in the second half and it's not quite at the same level. Now, what's your opinion on that? Is it a conscious decision by the team and the players that the game is seen out, or I find that hard to believe personally, knowing what Ange just said, or do you think it's something else that's contributing to the way the games are panning out that's causing us to kind of fall off a little bit in the second half?
My thoughts are that I think they try and get a 3-goal lead in the first half on every game they're playing to get that comfort zone, and it worked well against Rangers, it worked well against Motherwell. Almost worked against Aberdeen, but the third goal didn't come, and then they had the dip that Alan refers to in performance, and that is a bit of a concern if you're not a mandatory 3 goals up, which the play probably deserves. In the last few games, you saw it against Rangers and Motherwell, especially against Rangers, when Alan said that they gave Rangers the ball for the second half, but they did nothing with it and they were fine containing them. But it is a concern that though the levels dip in the second half, and I agree with Alan to an extent that if that's the case, then you have to bring on players to address that, don't you? You have to make substitutions and preempt any kind of problems that might arise, because they are playing at a high intensity. You just have to look at the first half of games. There is a high intensity there. And I think it's a conscientious decision where they are trying to kind of put things to bed. Or as early as they can. If they can score 3 goals, then all the better. But they are creating a lot of chances in the first half of games. Then obviously there's the second half is maybe not as hell for leather. Roaring, free scoring, never boring, I should probably call it. But you are noticing it. And that's the points that Alan's alluding to, that it's noticeable now and it's becoming more fraught because of the situation we now find ourselves in terms of going for the title. So that kind of drop-off in the second half is going to quote Jim, that's going to lead to heart attack football, isn't it? As a supporter, you're going to be watching it through splayed fingers at times. But I'm loath to criticise them in any way. I just thought the goals that they lost the other night were pretty symbolic to set-piece goals, because it's not been their forte. They've been very good with set-pieces and dealing with them, and the manager alluded to that after it. They get done by 2 set-pieces, and he keeps referring to that they can do things better and that they can improve on things, and I think that's what they can improve on, that kind of nature of defending high balls into the box, which Aberdeen get a bit of joy from, which has not been like Celtic. But they do have the meanest defence in the Premiership for a reason, because they're pretty solid. But there are moments or like periods, especially in second halves of games, where they have a wobble, don't they?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, even when they were in control against St Johnstone Boxing Day at McDermott Park, and they gave away Starfelt slack pass, ball cross into the box, goal, they wobbled, didn't they? And it was just so fortunate that they were going ahead and then got a third, made it easy. But that propensity to wobble is something, I think, as Alan says, when that's happening, you've got to preempt that problem and put on fresher players and combat it if you think it is going to happen. And at this moment in time, as much as they're playing some lovely football first half, getting themselves into commanding leads and commanding positions, it's still there. It's not the full 90 that they're going for at that kind of pace and that kind of level. I know it's hard to keep those levels up, but you are noticing that 60, 70 minutes there's a kind of tapering off, and depending on what the score is at that point, it can cost you. It nearly cost Celtic the other night. That's maybe the warning shot over the bow that they have to address it.
Yeah. John Curl on YouTube, John Curie, on YouTube, bringing in some positivity. We've beaten Aberdeen 3 times in the league this season. Rangers have drawn against them twice so far. That's a fair point. And a little comment from Snick67 on Twitch says, I like these wee crossovers. Love Big Alan's stats mixed with the eye test or whatever you call it watching a game now. So that is definitely the 2 sides of the coin that we get on this show.
These things are the criticism, Laura. Both Alan and I are making observations. We're not criticising the team. It's observations. Mine's is based on the eye test, and Alan's is based on stats and data. So it's, we're not having a pop here. We're just noticing things.
I'm still trying to process Big Alan, to be honest. I've no idea what that alludes to.
Do you know, it's something, Alan, I've spoken to you a bunch of times. I said this to Tony when I first met him in the flesh. I don't know if any of you are tall or short or what height you are. We just need to wait and find out, because I've only ever seen everybody in a sitting position, so we'll see when we do meet in the flesh one day.
A quarter of an inch under 6 foot.
I get Tony a lot, but it's just because of the big bar face on the screen, I think.
I love a ball face.
You just want to put it, didn't you?
Alan, I'll come back to you with some of the points that Tony's made, but this is an important one that we saw. Tony mentioned about being a little bit disappointed with some of the nature of the goals we've conceded. Danielle F on YouTube says, Ange was a defender back in his playing days. What's it going to take for someone to help us sort out our weakness at set piece and corners? Now, I have to say, while I agree that it is a weakness in the current team, it's something that's predated Ange. I think, as we all know as Celtic supporters, set pieces and corners and things seem to be a weakness for us. Again, we conceded from at least one of those the other night, and it seems to be something that we sort of bring upon ourselves a lot of the time. Where do you see the big issues from set pieces and things that we have when we're trying to defend them?
Yeah, no, listen, I mean, what I've learned doing this is that set piece and especially conceding from set pieces, is something that triggers people's confirmation biases, and it just, people have a view on whether you defend well or don't defend well at set plays, and it doesn't matter what the reality is. People's confirmation biases get triggered by these things. It's the same as trying to debate people who think you should always have two strikers up front. Once you've got that bias in your head, there's no reasoning. There's no reasoning with people. It's like, should you man mark or zonals if the only choice in the world is an extreme one or extreme the other? It's just people have these biases in their mind about it. So let me try and cut through a little bit. A few things to say on this. So first of all, let's acknowledge the fact that Aberdeen are one of the best teams in the league at set plays, right? They score a lot of goals from set plays, create a lot of chances from set plays. As we've seen in many games, they're very, very good. They're a big, strong physical team, and they're very good at messing the opposition up. Scott Brown, bless him, is probably the best at blocking players off the ball and messing people up. The goal that he scored was right off. We've seen it. We've seen that exact same set play Celtic executed. Rogic scored a goal from it earlier in the season. So but then people go, yeah, but what, we should have prepared for it then. It's like, well, there's like a million different ways you can launch a ball into a box, right? So listen, you got to give them a bit of credit. They're a good team at it. They scored 2 goals from it. Okay. Second thing is, we're not a big team, right? And it looks like it's not something that Postecoglou is going to prioritize. He's not gonna insist on having, like O'Neill did, a spine of at least 5 players that are big physical units in the side. Okay, so what's going to happen on occasion, okay, is you're going to get matchups like what happened with the second goal, where Ferguson is matched up to wee Greg Taylor. Now Greg Taylor's not bad in the air for a wee lad. But, occasionally someone who's about half a foot taller than him is going to beat him in the air. It's like, it will happen. And with a good delivery as well. As soon as the ball went in, I thought, oh, fuck. Because I just saw it was like it was just a good quality cross, right?
Is that because he's Big Lewis, Al?
He is Big Lewis.
Big Lewis.
Yeah. And, Lewis Ferguson plays his best football when he's not moving. He's good at jumping from a standing start. He's good at taking penalties, and he's good at falling over when anyone comes near him. Other than that, if it involves moving or any sort of motor skills, he's rubbish. But when you ask him not to move, he's absolutely a great footballer. So listen, there was a mismatch there because because of the players we've got, Starfelt, Taylor, Ralston, who are both decent in the air for wee guys, but they're going to be marking much bigger physical players. So I think sometimes you just got to say they're good at free set pieces, they executed well, and we don't necessarily have built a team to defend these things in terms of just sheer height when it's a good ball. Having said all that, you want to learn from it, you want to improve. Now, what I will say, and I'm going to write something on the Celtic by Numbers site over the weekend on this, because it looks like I'll be stuck in this room for another few days isolating, and I've got nothing else better to do, is I looked at, what is the expected goals that we're conceding from set plays this season. And if you look at the last, I've got data for the last 5 seasons, and it was pretty consistent over the first 3 of those. And then last year, it absolutely jumped up. It jumped up to 0.21 expected goals every game that we were giving up from set plays. So that's, when I say set play, I mean free kick passes, corner passes, or the play second phase immediately after those passes. So combine all those things together, we were up to 0.21 expected goals against every game from set plays. And we know that last year we were an incoherent mess all across the pitch. Okay, so that you want to take that as your benchmark for what really bad looks like. Okay, this season we're 0.11 expected goals against from set plays, which is almost half last season and is lower than any season since I've got records for. So that to me supports Postecoglou's assertion that what he said after the game, that this is something that surprised him. It's something that we've been improving on, but we didn't get it right that night. So what I would say is, in summary, for all that, is that it was a bad night against an opponent for which this is a particular strength, but I don't think it's a systemic issue.
Strangelove the Doctor seems to agree with you, says Aberdeen's main weapon is set pieces. He doesn't think they've scored from open play for months now. It's a concern because, like Alan says, confirmation bias comes into it just because set pieces are so recognisable as a weakness when they are a weakness. Having said that, I think there is something to be said for Celtic kind of trying to be a bit more careful not to give these away, because they are, you might only give away a few a game, but if of those few a game you end up conceding a high proportion of those as goals, then it becomes a problem. Tony, to look more at the positives in the game before we move on to obviously the Raith Rovers match for the second half of the show, who were your standout performers in terms of individuals? Who did you really see brought a lot to the game and allowed us to push on to the finish for the victory?
First and foremost, I'm just delighted that Alan used the words incoherent mess and he never aimed it at me.
It's early days.
Early, yeah, Grouch Marks, so it's early yet, you know what I mean? So, standout performer so far, Big Al. I think you have to say big players do things when it matters, and Jota came up with 2 big goals, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
I think Matt O'Reilly has continued his impressive start in a Celtic jersey. His levels tapered off a wee bit in the second half, same way Hatate, but you look to guys like Jota, don't you, to if they're not scoring, to create. But he scored 10 goals for Celtic this season, and 4 of them have come against Aberdeen, and 2 of them have been winners at Pittodrie, and one of them has been a crucial goal and a 2-1 win, or the opening goal and a 2-1 win against Aberdeen at Celtic Park. So I think, I keep saying this and we keep alluding to it, but Jota gets it. He gets how important it is and how serious it is, that when you're playing in these big games, big venues, tough venues, you have to perform. And he most certainly did. I like the look of Matt O'Reilly. I think Matt O'Reilly's a terrific footballer in the making. It's just, that ball in for the first goal is brilliant. Just that, as I've said before, that the corridor of uncertainty, as it's now called, but just put it right in between defenders and goalkeepers. If there's a lack of communication there and somebody like Jota switched on, and you go. Abada's profited from balls like that from Hatate in the past couple of games. Just bang, you're in there. If there's any hesitation, and that's the one good thing about the Celtic players. They're certainly switched on. Ange has got them playing in a way where they're switched on, especially in the first halves of games. So balls like that coming in, they're anticipating before anybody else, and they're getting in there and they're profiting. So I'm impressed by that. Try to think who else played well. I still think Cameron Carter-Vickers for me has been one of the lone signings of the season. He's just generally unruffled. I've not seen him lose the rag, even when your man from St Johnstone was kicking lumps out of him as you lay on the floor. A big guy like that gets up and starts swinging. Normally, you would think he just keeps his composure. He just really looks the part. And I'd love to see Celtic sign him on a permanent deal at the end of the season. Again, another one who gets it, and his consistency levels have been terrific. And then people can say I should maybe be a wee bit more dominant in the air, but again, it's Alan going back to your bias at set pieces and stuff like that. But to me, he's been particularly dominant. I've not seen any centre forward dominate since he came at all, and he just looks every inch a defender, and a quality one at that. Maybe we got into Europe, the standard increases, and he's been in major tests, but I've not really seen anybody give him the real runaround. And I think he's settled, he's happy, and there's a lot to be said for that. And he really is. He's an 8 or 9 out of 10 performer every other week. Joe Hart as well. Joe Hart's been terrific. Although he dug the ball out the net twice, 3 times actually. One was offside, but I don't think you can fault Joe Hart at all this season. He's been absolutely sensational for Celtic, to be honest.
And to be fair, that was a great catch from Jota's golf shot as well. That was fantastic.
Yes, I did see that footage. The stage where you think about Joe Hart, is there nothing that he can't do? A bit like Henrik Larsson, remember when he scored all those goals and then he got a hole in one at the golf? The guys were just like, You know what?
Stop
In the words of Billy Connolly when he was singing the Super Grand song, is there nothing that she can't do? You know, is there nothing that we can't do? You know, so yeah. So I just think we've got a lot of players who are hitting the mark at the minute. You know, Abada as well. Abada took a right one, by the way, from Bates the other night.
Yeah.
I question whether that was a red. I don't know if you thought that yourself, but no attempt to play the ball.
Yeah, I think the fact that it looks like a to the referee, it looks like a genuine attempt to play the ball, and it's not like an unnaturally high angle that he comes in. I think saves him in that regard.
But he has clattered into him, and it's
yeah, it's a sore one. Yeah, definitely.
Nasty, you know,
he knew it. He knew it was.
Yeah. So Abada's been, stepping up to the plate as well. So we've got players all over the park, and Tom Logic. That display against Motherwell was just, honest to God, even the nonchalance of the or the lack of celebration, the nonchalance when he stuck that into the top corner, as if it's what I do.
Yeah.
Why are you surprised? Crowd's going mental, and he's just like.
When you give me the freedom of the park and nobody bothers to close me down, I'm just going to stick in the top corner.
Yeah, in the top corner and discuss the options later. What you want me to do with it, you know. Yeah. And he was really annoyed at himself that he hit the post in the second half for the hat trick. So, but he played as if he was a guy that hadn't even been away in international duty. And we'll
absolutely
come to the Raith game, but I would actually like to see O'Reilly and Rogic in the same starting team. We beat on Holden and just go and run riot.
Wow, that's an exciting prospect. Speaking of O'Reilly, Alex Shunde on YouTube says, enjoy O'Reilly, he'll be a huge transfer out within 2 years. My fear is that might be the case with more than just O'Reilly, but we will enjoy him while he's here. I have to say I totally agree with your assessment of most of the players there. I think Rogic, if you had asked me a year ago, would I be excited to see Rogic coming back from international duty and back into the team, I'd have said, what are you talking about? But here we are. I've had the pleasure of watching the last few games with my brother-in-law, who's a Rangers supporter, and to be fair to him, I don't pay a lot of attention to Rangers and what they do week to week and what their players are doing individually week to week, but it's interesting to have him sitting there comparing what we have and what our strengths are compared to what their strengths are, or their lack thereof at the moment. And he was kind of saying, that, you've got players like Rogic, you've got players like O'Reilly, you've got players like Kyogo before he got injured, who you just know are going to make a difference when they're on the pitch, and it's something that you can't always rely on. Certainly not something we could rely on last season anyway. Even if we had a stronger bench last season, there was nobody on the bench that you thought could come on and make a change. Whereas we're in the fortunate position, or not so fortunate position, but through the hard work of Ange and the team, having a team where we have players on the pitch we think we can make a difference. We have players on the bench who come on and can make a difference as well, and it's a great position to be in. Alan, Tony mentioned Cameron Carter-Vickers, Tom Rogic, Matt O'Reilly, Abada. Are you in agreement with those choices as the kind of standout performers of the last few games, or is there anybody else you would like to give a special mention to?
No, I think actually, the data supports very well Tony's eye test in terms of that game. Absolutely spot on. The only other one I would chuck in for a wee mention that you didn't mention specifically against Aberdeen is Greg Taylor, who similar to in the derby did a power of work defensively. A lot of it probably bits and pieces, but it all accumulates during a game. And he actually put in a really good performance defensively, which he had done in the derby. He didn't really contribute a lot in an attacking sense, but then again, the fullbacks in the last few games, Motherwell, the derby game, and then the first half against Aberdeen, have not had to get forward a lot. They've just been there to get the ball through the lines, and they've been given ample time to do that and then defend when they've had to. So, I would definitely shout out to Taylor, but otherwise, what you said about Carter-Vickers, I can't really add too much to. I mean, his numbers are fantastic. He's right up there with the best centre-backs we've had since I've captured the data, and so that gives you that's a peer group of Van Dijk, Julian, Ayer. That's the sort of and Carter-Vickers is up there with those three as being in the premier centre-backs that we've had in recent times. Absolutely. And the fact is that every single game, he's just so consistent. He's a little bit of the antithesis to Starfelt in the sense that everything Carter Vickers does is understated, unflustered, with an economy of effort and movement, as opposed to Starfelt, who literally falls over trying to pass the ball. He's just a complete contrast in physical styles, really. But anyway, don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Otherwise, in terms of the team hitting form, yeah, I mean, O'Reilly to me is just an absolute dream of a footballer. Is if you look at the little things, the little touches, his ability to control difficult balls under huge pressure, which is very sort of Roderick-esque, I suppose. But the thing that he perhaps does that people may not have picked up upon because it's very understated is his defensive work. Because he doesn't run around the pitch flying into people like Ryan Christie used to do. He nicks the ball from people because his anticipation is so good. He sees the body angle of the opponent. He sees where the ball is, and his brain works so quickly. He can just nick the ball without really seeming like he's tackled anyone, and he sort of burgles it. And it's not particularly obvious. Doesn't particularly stand out. It's like a crunching tackle that the fans love. But he does that a lot, and his defensive actions are much more higher volume than you'd think they were. So in that sense, he's shaping up, as is Hatate, to be that sort of perfect number 8, where you want creativity, you want goal threat, you want defensive actions, right? You want that whole and that box to box ability as well. So, but in terms of his technical skills, I'm going to resist doing what I did on the huddle breakdown yesterday of talking about his Dalglish-esque bottom as well. I'll not repeat my Al Pacino impression, but he's got that. He's got that going for him. He's a huge ass. He's got this big ass. He's got this big ass, right? It's just like Kenny Dalglish's, as I said. So I love it because I just love Matt O'Reilly, and I don't normally go overboard about players that haven't played like at least 900 minutes, but I'm going to make an exception for this kid. I think he's really special.
No, nobody used the gluteus maximus like Kenny Dalglish did they? Nobody, and nobody I've seen in world football before.
I'll give you one now. I obviously didn't see Kenny Dalglish in his prime, but I tell you, John McGinn can back it up.
John McGinn is the nearest. Yeah,
maybe that I've seen that he uses that part of his anatomy to heal the football well. But I agree with Alan about O'Reilly. It's the deft touches, isn't it, Alan, and the guile that he possesses. Just as you say, the things that go unnoticed, but just even the wee shunts and the wee layoffs to people who get shot.
The winning goal. The ball broke to him in central midfield, and he was kind of side on, and without even breaking stride, he just passed this diagonal ball. Yeah. I think it was Taylor. It went through the eye of a needle, took out about 3 Aberdeen players, and kept the move going. It was just a beautiful, skillful. On a bobbly pitch on a windy night, it was just brilliant.
Yeah, and you see your bias kicks in with Taylor, because most people remember Taylor for being beat by Big Lewis for the header the other night. They won't have watched or noticed anything else, because that'll have clouded their judgment about his performance.
No, he did a power of work.
And that to me, defensively, I thought he was terrific against Rangers and Motherwell.
Oh yeah, he was. Yeah.
It was his pass that set up the opening goal against Motherwell. The one Hatate, and it's just opened the whole field out. Those kind of moments, So
yeah, agree.
No, I think I've got to come in here and say both of you know, and certainly everybody watching the show know. I'm probably one of Greg Taylor's biggest critics. I think personally still believe that in terms of the quality that we've managed to bring in under Ange and the quality that we have in the squad now, he still remains one of the weaker links who I think in time will be replaced. But I can't disagree. I think his performances these last stretch of 4 or 5 matches in particular have been outstanding. Some of his best in a Celtic shirt, I would say, particularly against Rangers. I thought he was really excellent. And I think it's a sign of a good professional that he is able to raise his game to match those around him. Perhaps he hasn't been challenged enough by previous management, previous players around him, and he's needed that little bit extra sort of motivation or inspiration from those around him to raise his game, and he's certainly doing that.
Yeah,
Sorry, Alan, on you go.
Sorry, Laura. No, just on Taylor. I think we can simultaneously agree, which is acknowledge the fact he's playing absolutely brilliantly at the moment, and make the point that I suspect he's not the long-term solution to that. And the reason I say that is you've got to absolutely love the kid's attitude, right? In fact, even when he wasn't playing well, I see a player that wants to improve, wants to be the best footballer he can be. I've always thought that about Greg Taylor. But there's just some imponderable physical limitations that he has that you cannot, you're not going to improve. You're not going to make him super fast. He's not going to be particularly, quick enough to play in this system. He's not going to have the technical ability that you need to play as a fullback in this system, and he's not going to compensate by having enormously athletic attributes. So, to me, you're never going to resolve those things. But what you can say is that the kid is improving, and he absolutely has a fantastic attitude. So, I like him. I like him a lot, while still thinking he's not the answer in the long term.
Yeah, I think you could probably apply the same to Anthony Ralston.
Exactly.
You have a player there who I think even he would admit is technically limited, but look at the difference in attitude that Celtic fans have towards him just because they see a player who is trying his best to make the most of the abilities that he has, and is certainly a better footballer than many of us criticising him would be. So yeah, I think there's a point to be made there.
I credit the manager for that, Laura. That's tremendous man management to get those two players to play possibly above what their ability level will show. But he's clearly taken them aside and he's put faith in them, and they put their faith in him and say, okay, whenever I go into that park, I'll perform for you. So I can't underemphasise the role of the manager in that, to be honest. I mean, he really has got a group of guys who are playing for him, in every position. So long may that continue.
Yeah, I think we've seen enough of that, especially towards the end of Neil Lennon's reign. Some of the stuff he was saying in public, some of the stuff other players were saying in public, regardless of who was right or wrong, there was definitely a disconnect there between manager and player, and there's anything but that with Ange. They are running through brick walls for him as any team who believes in what their manager is saying would do, and long may it continue, because as we all know, there's certain managers. Jose Mourinho is one that springs to mind. He relies on players being willing to run through brick walls for him, and the minute that stops is when the success sort of dwindles away, or when he stops being able to get that out of players is when his career takes a downward trajectory, which I think has happened in the case of a lot of great managers, but hopefully for Ange that doesn't happen for a long time.
I'd run through that wooden wardrobe for Ange. You know what I mean? That's like that would be.
I'd run through my lunch for Ange.
I'm not going to say what I'd run through for Ange. I think he's summed it up pretty well there. But we'll move on to the next tie that Celtic are involved in. It's Celtic Raith Rovers this weekend in the 5th round of the Scottish Cup, which, as always, will be covered live here on Axom. So get subscribed and get your notifications on to be made aware when we go live. Ryan Kelly pretty much brings up the question that we're going to ask. I'd play a good mix of regular and probably some second choice players for Raith on Sunday, as long as it's a strong enough team to win the game. Tony, I'll come to you first on this. We've had a tight and sort of compact run of games over the past few weeks. They have been very high tempo, as all Ange's games are. We've had players coming back from international duty. Do you see the pack getting shuffled again? Do you see there being a major change, or is Ange going to look for a bit of consistency going into this game, given what he's had to put up with in the last few weeks?
I think it's like everything else. You want to win the domestic treble, so you're going to have to take it seriously. But I think this is the optimum chance that you can rest players and bring in a lot of guys, fringe players who are champing at the bit to play. And I picked a team for the Celtic way. I'll try and remember it. And there's a few changes that I've picked. Bain in goal. I've picked Ralston, Carter Vickers and Welsh, and Scales. I've picked Beaton. Beaton Orogic. There you go, Orogic, isn't it? Beaton, O'Reilly and Rogic. And I've put Giacomakis, and Jota, and I've actually wanted to see Ben Doak get a start.
Okay.
So that was the team, Doak and Jota out wide and Giakoumakis up front. I just thought that you should be able to take care of Raith Rovers comfortably, and I think if you want to rest players like McGregor, rest Hatate, who's played a lot of football, rest Starfelt, Juranovic, guys like that, then Taylor as well, then do it. And that's still a strong side. I still think it's a team that will be capable of beating Raith Rovers. Everybody's side will be different. They'll pick a different 11, but when you're asked to nail your colours to the mast and pick an 11, then that's what come up. But I think the Ben Doak one is interesting to me. I'd like to see a little bit more of the boy, and I think if you set him out with Giakoumakis and Jota, you could feel, confident that they could maybe talk him through it and help him through it and stuff. And with the midfielders, when I'm making up names of players, you know what I mean. So that's wonderful. But yeah, I'd like to say that at the start, I just want to see Roderick and O'Reilly play together. I think that'd be very creative, and I think that would help somebody like Ben Doak, because I think they could utilise his pace by playing that kind of deft and guile through ball to him. And the romance of the cup and all that, 16-year-old boy, go and write some headlines. That's the way I would approach it. That's what I would do if I was Ange. I can never second guess him. A couple of things I've been asked to get the name the team, and I've got it spot on, but I just put that down to luck. I was woefully wrong against Alloa, but nobody would have picked that team against Alloa. So,
I'll ask Alan about the Ben Doak thing in a second, but I wanted to come back to you on another selection that you made there, Tony, before I do that. Stephen Welsh at the back. This is a perfect opportunity for him to come in. Do you think he's got grounds to be a little bit frustrated at the fact he's not had more opportunities so far this season? I mean, we've touched on, that perhaps Starfelt remains a little bit of a weak link, even though I have to say his performances have improved greatly since the start of the season. Do you think Stephen Welsh might be sitting there thinking he deserved a bit more of an opportunity, or do you think there's time for that to come?
Cameron Carter-Vickers and Carol Starfelt are the best defence in the Scottish Premiership. Conceded the least amount of goals. And again, your bias kicks in, as Alan keeps saying about the likes of Starfelt. Yeah, he looks cumbersome when he trips over sometimes, but see, he's a defender. I think he can defend. He's pretty rugged. And I think he's taken the lead off Cameron Carter-Vickers, because the two of them have dovetailed quite nicely recently. And not really looked under any real pressure. So, Carol Starfelt is coming on again for me. I was maybe vocal, not so much criticising, but I just thought he could maybe do a bit more or be a bit more rugged. And I think he has been in the past few performances that I've seen. So if you're having a go at Starfelt, then, and I don't know if Alan's stats will bear this out, but to me, he's pretty consistent. He's just as consistent as his defensive partner. Not as consistent, but he should be up there. Alan will let me know the stats on that. But so why would you break up that pairing when they're doing well? Welsh is just one of those guys. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's his time will come. He's got youth on his side. But again, you throw into the mix as well. I think Saturday's an ideal time to get Julian some game time too. I wouldn't want to start him because I wouldn't want that burden of pressure on him. But I think if you can give him a half or at least 35, 40 minutes, then just to get him used to kicking the ball about on the grass again in that kind of match situation, I think all these things will be in the manager's mind.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. AGSC Tech says Starfelt is being compared against Van Dijk and Denier, who are both world-class centre-backs. Starfelt doesn't need to be world-class, he just needs to be good. I think I made a similar point a few weeks ago. I think sometimes I feel as though a centre-back just needs to do his job to the point where you don't even notice him, and that's a good centre-back to me, and I think Starfelt for a lot of the time has done that. So he's certainly coming on to a game, and that's all fair points. Alan, I'll come to you. What kind of team do you see as fielding against Raith Rovers? Is this an opportunity for Ange to rest players, or is this an opportunity for him to keep the consistency of selection and keep the winning habit that people like to talk about so often? Oh, Alan, I think you're muted.
Sorry, because I've been coughing away here. Listen, this is the opportunity to get game time into the legs of players that need it, whilst keeping momentum and having a good enough team on the pitch to win the game. That's to me would be the kind of mindset, the mission statement for this game. I mean, Raith Rovers are not in a good place, right? I don't mean Fife. I mean, they went on a great run. I think they were like 13 games undefeated up to the beginning of middle of December, and they've gone 9 league games without a win. In fact, their only win in that period was against Darren O'Dea. I mean, Banks O'Dea, not Darren O'Dea. Banks O'Dea in the Scottish Cup. It's been their only victory since a win against Kilmarnock on the 11th of December. So this is not a team in good form. When we played them in the League Cup back in September, they did the park the bus thing. It was a very low block, a 4 and a 5 and a lone striker, and they just sat in. And there's no reason to think that they're going to do any different this time. So what that says to me is that a player like, for example, James McCarthy, who did play in that game, is utterly redundant. It's just a waste of a shirt. So you need to put a little bit more attacking threat on the pitch. So having said all that, I agree that Bain needs to play on the basis that you might need to call on him at any time. So he needs a bit of game time. Ralston is likely to be the only sort of fit right back, so he plays. I would actually go with Welsh and Julian because again, you're gonna need Welsh at some point, and he needs some games. Julian, I can't see another gap in the calendar when he's ever going to be able to start a game. They're going to be playing a very low block. For him, it's going to be about mainly recovering balls and then moving it forward, and then some set piece threat. It should be a good game to get him back in the saddle in that regard. At left back, Taylor's put in a hell of a shift in hard games recently, so I'd bring Scales in. I'd have Bitton as the sitting player, and then the two I'd bring Rogic back in because he didn't play much the other night, and I'd keep Hatate in because Hatate hasn't played 90 minutes yet, and is essentially, as I keep saying, if you think about it logically, he's coming to the end of his pre-season. He stopped playing at the beginning of December. We're now sort of halfway through January. He should be just getting up to peak fitness for the rest of the season. So I'd get 90 minutes into Hatate's legs. And then on the right, I would put Forrest in because Forrest desperately needs, to get minutes into his legs as well. I would play Giacomakis and I would play Maeda on the left for the same reasons I'd play Hatate. Maeda's not played that many minutes for Celtic. He's flown halfway around the world. He's essentially coming to the end of his pre-season. He could do with another good 90 minutes in his belt. So that would be my team and the reason for it.
That's an interesting one. One thing I'll say about Hatate, I get your point about the 90 minutes, but my opinion was the other night was the first game I saw him slightly off the boil against Aberdeen, maybe not having the impact that he has had in previous games. And your opinion of playing the 90 minutes seems to go in opposite to what I was thinking, is that this might be an opportunity to rest him. Do you think that's maybe another option to go with, or would you still go with the 90 minutes despite the performance against Aberdeen?
Yeah, I think so. As I say, I do think he needs the minutes, and it's like, as I say, it's like he's getting to the point where, imagine this was early August. He's kind of at that point where he needs to get some game time, I think. So yes, it was a difficult game for him. He did okay. I did write about this a little bit on the Celtic Way. Hatate's caught everyone's eye, especially because of long range goals and 2 goals in a derby. But that tends to, again, perception bias has kind of kicked in because of that. In terms of him, he's actually done okay. His underlying numbers are not as amazing as you might think they are, and that's not a criticism. That's not a criticism. I'm just stating a fact. O'Reilly's like off the scale. Hatate's been pretty steady, but he's had some great moments, and people remember those moments, right? Those are the things that live with people. And I'm not saying that he's a bad player because of that, and I'm not saying he's not been playing well. He has. He's perfect. He looks perfect for the role that Celtic want him to play. So I'm really happy with him. But I just say, in my opinion, I just think he could do with getting those 90 minutes. He hadn't done 90 minutes yet for Celtic, so let's see if he can push through and get that. Because we need his quickness of thought to kind of open up what's going to be a very stuffy defence.
Yeah. Come on, Alan, you've been on the internet long enough to know people will just clip that and say you've called Hatate rubbish now.
There you go. Oh, I know. And it'll be Celtic fans that do it.
Probably. Small minority, exactly. Tony, I'll come back to you on the Ben Doak thing because we didn't get a chance to go into that in a little bit more detail. What do you make of his starting a Celtic shirt? He seems like a pretty exciting young prospect who, I have to say, for somebody who follows everything Celtic, he kind of came out of nowhere for me, his opportunity in the team this season. It wasn't a name that I was aware of. We all know about Owen Moffat and players of his like who've been in and around the squad, and Ben Doak kind of seems to have come out of the blue and made a little bit of an impact. What is it that's exciting you so much about him that you would like to see him against Raith Rovers?
I just think he's a young boy that maybe deserves a wee run out and to be unleashed, because you saw the pace that he's got. He looks really, really quick. I just think it'd be a great kind of Cinderella story for him. To come on and play and score and celebrate in front of the Celtic supporters, and bearing in mind there's also the backstory that Liverpool are watching him, so I think there'd be method in the madness for Celtic to play him, and just sort of say, okay, let's start playing him, and if you want him, then let's talk, So, but I'd rather Celtic kept on to, if he is a precocious young talent, which he might be, don't know yet, not seen enough of him, which is why I think this could be the right opportunity to unleash him. He's something different, isn't he? It's something who potentially could be exciting. And the snippets that you have seen of Ben Doak, you've been quite impressed with him. I think as a young boy at 16, you'd be bursting to play in the first team, and if the manager gave you the nod, you would bust a gut. And I think you would I think we like to see young players coming through, don't we? And that excites us. I mean, we've got all our fair players. We've got some wonderful footballers at the club. But I think we take much more pride in seeing a Ben Doak figure come into the team, and you would just will him to do well. And I just think it's an opportunity, a chance for the manager to say to him tomorrow, go and enjoy yourself. Go and make your mum and dad proud. Go and score a goal and put your name in lights at Celtic Park in a Scottish Cup tie, and just hand them that opportunity. And that, I think, because of, as Alan said, Raith Rovers, they're in a bit of, their form's not great, the backstory with them leading up to this, so I just think that if Celtic are going to give a chance to someone like Ben Doak, then a game like this would be worth your while. And also let him see what he can do for 90 minutes. Because the boy's fast. I want to see you know what I mean? We've watched him and we think he's fast. I want to see him in a game, start the game and see what he can do. And I would, I'd love to see that happen. Whether it happens or not, purely down to the manager. But as I say this now, Liverpool, stay away. We want to see more of this boy, and a couple of years yet, and then when you come up with a decent figure, we'll maybe talk.
A precocious young talent breaking through at Celtic and heading to Liverpool for the big time. Where have we heard that one before, Tony? I wonder. Alan, I'll come back to you on this one as well. I've put the question rather excitedly to Kevin the night that we watched the Rangers match and did the match coverage for Axom. We're going into this Scottish Cup tie against Raith Rovers, who, with all due respect, if we have any intentions on winning the trophy, we have to assume that we'll get past. We've secured the League Cup. We're doing well in the league. Is it too early to start talking about trebles again, or what do you think? Is that a bit presumptuous, do you think?
Not to put you in the spot,
Alan. Predictions and getting ahead of ourselves is not really my strong point. Usually,
well, true.
I'll kind of take the data as I get it, sort of thing. So, listen, what I have said consistently And what I picked up from Ange very early is that he will be telling that team they can win every single game they play. So when it comes to Europa Conference, for example, I don't care if we get drawn against Roma or Marseille or Tottenham. I don't remember who's still in the damn thing. He will be expecting or telling those players that we're in this to win it. We're in it to win every competition. And I'm absolutely convinced about that. And I think that's the way that we'll play. So, as I say, there will be a lot of changes, but it's a big squad and people need game time, and but the attitude will be we're going to win. We're going to win. There's none of this. Oh, it doesn't really matter. We're thinking about Thursday. None of that attitude will be allowed. I don't think anywhere near the squad. It'll be every game is there to be won, and I think that's I think I love that. It's refreshing to me. I've always felt I absolutely despair, especially in England, when you see fans of these so-called big clubs saying, "Oh, I hope we play the kids in the League Cup and all this sort of thing." And whilst I agree with Tony, you do want to see young players play. I want to see us win every single game. I want us to compete for every single trophy that we enter. And I'm kind of old-fashioned like
that. Well, thanks very much for both of your time today. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Don't forget, we are back for the match coverage this weekend against Raith Rovers. As always, you can find Tony doing what he does best, writing what he wrote on the Celtic Way. You can subscribe to that. They've been sponsors of the channel previously, and you can see his output there. You can follow Alan at Celtic by Numbers on Twitter, where he shares a lot of his stats. And you can catch him on the Huddle Breakdown podcast, which, Alan, I have to say, took on a little bit of a different meaning last season. I think the Huddle Breakdown compared to what the meaning of the name is this season, but it's a lot more positive than the connotations than I think it was last season. But it's a great show for anybody who's interested in the stats side of the game. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We will see you again very soon on A Celtic State of Mind.